Okay, we're back again, a different panel. I must tell Mr. Marchant to allow for rescue breaks between these panel sessions so that people can have time to go and get coffee, etc. We're going to talk about the macro developments that are hugely relevant to everybody in the room in terms of what the major countries that affect what OFCs do and the major international agencies are doing and what they're thinking of doing. And there's been significant overload, as you all have seen, in the international media and the political arena, which seems to be accelerating in terms of, some would say, lunacy, when everybody seems to be coming up with a new plan which the politicians and the media then wave around, and then somebody comes up with another plan, and you end up rather confused, twirling around, wondering whose plan is where, how are they going to fit together, and whose plan is going to be preeminent. It's a little like the competition between different manufacturers of videotapes and DVDs and CDs, and it would be good, I think, if we could move towards a common standard and some certainty in the world so that individuals and corporations could get on with their lives and plan them accordingly. The gentleman who I want to nail is actually in the room here still, and I wonder, Gonzalo, could I ask you if you wouldn't mind coming up and sitting on the panel with us, because I think if we get the question and answer, Gonzalo has been very involved as CEO of Cayman Finance in some of the you can get a late checkout, Gonzalo. Just go to the beach. We have got here today, we're very fortunate to have, because I think it's one of probably the first occasion where a very, very senior member of the Cayman Islands government has appeared on a panel here in his official capacity, and that's Dr. Dax Basdeo, who is Chief Officer in the Ministry of Finance, who has been critically involved in many of the matters about which you're reading in the press in terms of where the UK is going, where the US is going, where the EU is going. And he will start us off by giving us an update on where he sees these things are and where they may be going, to the extent he may have to be somewhat discreet and use code language, so you'll have to listen very carefully to what he says and also listen very closely to the silences. And next to him is Professor Andrew Morris, who's a professor of law at the University of Alabama Law School. He's a regular visitor to Cayman. He has also become a renowned expert on OFCs, and a paper that he has jointly written with one of his colleagues at the University of Alabama is shortly to be published, which analyzes the development of the Cayman Islands as an offshore financial center since the 1960s, which has some fascinating research both in the UK and in Cayman as to the policy decisions that were made by both governments and as to how Cayman reached the position that it is today. So I've asked Gonzalo Hales to join us as well, because he has been very involved as CEO as Cayman Finance, and you heard him speak eruditely about banking matters. Well, he's going to be available to speak equally eloquently about G8, G20 matters as well. So without more, I'd like to ask Dr. Basdeo Dax to start us off by giving us the macro view from the Cayman Islands government perspective.
Good morning. Thanks, Tim. Let's see. Starts off with a bit of background. I think the last day or so has certainly given us a lot of context for the discussion that's been happening in the media and between governments in the last few weeks, last few months. So I'm not going to spend too much time going through some of that context. But needless to say that there's been a lot of activity, a lot of interest playing out in the global stage right now. I just wanted to mention that, sort of to Tim's point about multiple standards, there are various agenda out there in terms of various groups, each one perhaps slightly different, some more so than others, but the G20 in terms of overall body having quite a defined program, as well as the G8, which is the subject of this panel. But also want to mention the EU in terms of the work that they're doing on the issue of taxation and international tax administration, and the UN in terms of their programs. On that slide, I have a reference to the G0.7, which is a reference to those countries that have committed to putting 0.7% of their national incomes into development assistance. Because I think the point about poverty reduction is an important one to understand as a driver for what some of this debate actually is. So focusing in particular on the UK and the UK's G agenda, Prime Minister Cameron earlier this year in January outlined the 3 T's for his agenda: trade, tax and transparency. And in that speech you can quite clearly see the references to how to improve the situation in less developed countries. The transparency and tax matters in particular are designed perhaps to allow less developed countries to be more self-sufficient in their tax administration and to be less reliant on development assistance. So given that sort of agenda and that background, certainly in communication with all the overseas territories and Crown dependencies, this agenda has really come forward. So towards late March, we had a meeting with Her Majesty's Treasury and Revenue and Customs, Foreign Commerce Office in London to discuss the G8 agenda, what was expected from the UK and how the OTs and CDs could be a part of that process. And in that outlining, certainly UK FATCA as something for us all to be a part of. Initially mention of the OECD Multilateral Convention on the mutual assistance in administration of tax matters. The name is quite long and I often forget it. Also the FATF in terms of revised standards and some discussion on anti-corruption. Following that, in early April, you noted the UK and G5 launching a multilateral pilot for the automatic exchange of information. This is a sort of a key announcement, and since that point, certainly the UK is saying to its OTs and CDs, this is something that you should all be a part of as well. A subtle shift in terms of focus, but an important one nevertheless. To understand that, and what's sort of driving perhaps some of the UK's agenda,